Hello everyone, I am Tanmay as part of the Student Energy Chapter at Atria University. This is our first podcast and it will obviously continue on with a series of podcasts aiming at energy literacy as well as sustainability in the near future. Let me introduce to you what Student Energy actually is. It's a non-profit organization that has about 50,000 students across 120 countries, as well as it promotes and organizes, sort of develops partnership with organizations to promote youth in general to go into the field of sustainability and energy. Alright, so joining me today is Mr. Abhishek Padmanabhan. We are very excited because this is our first podcast. Thank you for being here. So let me do an intro of you.
Yeah, please go.
So Abhishek is an energy sector specialist and is a big proponent of decentralized energy. He is an alumnus of IIT Bombay as well as Cornell University, and he has looked at different energy resources from a policy, economics, and technology lens at an energy regulator in the US and Canada's largest utility. After returning to India, he worked as a founding employee of Sun Edison's now Phoenix Energy as VP of Technology, where he worked as where he led product development and strategic initiatives, partnerships, as well as policies. He now leads the Center of Excellence at Atria University and is focusing on solving problems in energy and e-mobility sectors through research, product development, and training institutions. Right. So before we start the podcast with our esteemed guests, let me give you some facts and figures about the renewable energy sector of India. India ranks fourth in wind power capacity and fifth in solar power capacity, solar energy. India has attracted about USD 10.4 billion in renewable energy investments in 2021. Solar capacity of India has reached about 84.27 gigawatts as of May 2024, and its solar rooftop capacity has only reached 10.4 gigawatt as of 2020. So Abhishek, the topic that you are going to be discussing with us will be based on rooftop solar capacity. So can you please share some of the key benefits of adopting rooftop solar, especially for homeowners and businesses in India?
I wanted to point out one thing about your statistics, right? Out of the 87 something gigawatt which is being installed of solar power capacity, only 10 gigawatt is rooftop solar. Out of that, only 2.5 gigawatt is residential rooftop. Right, so the number is very small. In most countries, rooftop solar is close to around 1/3 to half of their actual solar installations which happen, the capacity additions which happen. In India, it's only 1/8 for rooftop itself as a sector. So we've gone very heavy on utility scale solar, which are large plants, say in Rajasthan or Gujarat or Karnataka. But we rarely ignore the real estate which is right on top of our roofs, right? Be it our homes, our offices, and so on. And to me, that's a missed opportunity, which is starting to get rectified, but it's still very far away from actually getting rectified. So, in terms of rooftop solar, the first thing is that you are essentially monetizing real estate you already have, right? This is your roof. You've already paid for the roof. You own the building. This can be an office, it can be your house, it can be a hospital, it can be any institution for that matter.
Small scale institution.
Small scale, even larger scale, right? Warehouses, for example, warehouses have so much space on their roof, most of which is not utilized. So, rooftop solar can be as small as maybe putting one panel on a roof for powering a few lights and fans. Can be as big as a few megawatt or I mean, this can be as big as like 200, 300 megawatt, right? If it's a large industrial facility. So I think the benefits are very clear. Today, rooftop solar is a better investment than, say, mutual funds or something of that sort. For residential customers, today you can get a 3 kilowatt rooftop system for somewhere in the range of 2 lakh, including taxes and so on, out of which the government is actually giving you a subsidy of 78,000. Now that rooftop solar generates enough energy to typically pay off the cost of that, say the remaining 1.2 lakh, within somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 years. So it's a very attractive economic investment today, because this rooftop solar is not just paying back in 3 to 4 years. It's actually giving you energy for the next 20, 25 years as long as you maintain it. So it's essentially an investment in which you've put in some capital right at the start, but it generates multiple times its value over the course of its lifetime. So it's a very promising investment in itself. That gives you somewhere, if you're familiar with equity adjusted returns, for corporates, because they can actually claim depreciation benefit on this for any asset they own, the investment becomes even more attractive because of that. So typically they are able to pay back their investment in the range of 2 to 3 years, right? But the same benefits remain, which is that it keeps generating for another 20, 25 years.
And I think for a common household, the basic advantage of a rooftop solar is in reduction of the electricity.
Yeah, so basically that's how, I mean, when I say payment, it's essentially in terms of savings of electricity. So for most rooftop plants, you can opt for net metering. Net metering allows you to offset whatever you generate during, say, the day with whatever you're consuming, say, at night, right? So over the course of the month, you actually offset your generation versus your consumption. So for a 3 kilowatt system, for example, like I said, it's able to generate almost somewhere in the range of 120 to 150 units every month of electricity.
And I think a common household does not require more than 100 units.
Correct. So that is 120 to 150 units per kilowatt. So for a 3 kilowatt system, you're looking at saving somewhere in the range of 350 to 450 units, right? That works out to a saving in terms of electricity bill, depending on which state you are. But let's take Karnataka, for example, that work out to some savings of somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 rupees a month. That is fairly substantial when you look at it as a 25-year lifetime. As we go on also, our electricity rates are going to increase. But once you've invested solar, you are essentially offsetting more and more expensive units of electricity every year. So the investment becomes more and more valuable as time passes. Right? But this is not predicated on the fact that your solar system will actually last 20-25 years, for which a lot of care has to be taken, and we'll get into that in subsequent place.
So we discussed about the financial as well as the incentives that rooftop solar can be beneficial in terms of its reliability as well as reducing electricity bill and other important factors. But in terms of technology, what do you think is the significance of making rooftop solar into what it is right now, an expanding sector itself?
So rooftop solar has benefited from primarily 3 or 4 things, right? The first is that solar technology itself has become so cheap at this point compared to what it was 10 years ago. We usually like to do things on a per watt basis so that it removes how big the plant is and gives a common reference. So for example, the same 3 kilowatt system that I spoke about for rooftop solar, we'll say it's 66 rupees per watt, which is roughly, when you multiply that by 3000 for 3000 watts, it'll roughly end up at 2 lakh for the system, right? So we like to frame things that way because it gives us a common frame of reference. Now solar prices have dropped from almost back in 2014 and so on, they were close to around 100, 2010 to 2014, they were close to 100 rupees per watt for a solar panel. Today they are close to 15 rupees per watt, right? It's almost a 6x decrease we have seen, and I think it's more than that. I mean, back then we had very few companies actually manufacturing solar panels. Today it's become far more ubiquitous. The capacity, manufacturing capacity has gone up. The solar panels have become significantly more efficient, right? They've also become larger in size and so on. So the end result of that is that you are able to create far more efficient systems at a much lower price compared to what you were able to do 10 years back. Now that has obviously benefited utility scale plants, which are large plants, quite a bit. It's also benefited rooftop systems, but it's an indirect consequence of it benefiting utility scale plants, right? Second is that power electronics technologies have become a lot smarter and so on. The end result of that is that we are actually getting data from every single solar installation which is done of late, right? The government has also mandated any system which gets subsidy needs to be connected to the internet and actually push data to the internet. So the end result of that is that we are able to identify issues in solar plants, we are able to maintain its longevity a little better than we used to be able to do back in say 10 years back, last decade, right? So these two are huge factors. The power electronics technology in the inverters have improved, so the efficiency has gone up significantly. Again, 10 years back, you used to rarely be able to get inverters which were 90% efficient or more. Today, the default in the market is somewhere in the range of 96 to 97% efficiency. So again, that has increased the amount of energy which is actually being generated from the solar plant. More of what the panels produce is actually being converted to usable AC power. Second thing is that the heat itself has become much lesser, because heat is essentially that 3% which is rejected by the inverter, right? Whereas in the earlier days when it was an 85% inverter, 15% of what you generated essentially became heat.
So when you say heat, does that mean that modern day inverters are better cooling technology?
So modern day inverters don't need better cooling technology compared to traditional inverters back in last decade. So they all used to have fans to cool it. Today you can just do without a fan.
So the product itself
convectively cools. Right? It's out in the open and it cools. The inverters also are IP65, so they are actually water resistant and dust resistant, so you can keep them outdoors. So there's a bunch of things which have been done on that front to actually make it more ubiquitous, make it more accessible to people across even in this price range, right? And the inverters themselves have become cheaper. So all of these technological developments are happening against a falling price curve. So these two are the major factors. They are also major components, right? The panels actually generate electricity that's DC, and then conversion happens in the inverter. So these two are a major factor. Broadly, everything else is technology which was in some shape or form already there, but scale has allowed it to get a lot better. One place where I would say rooftop solar has really benefited is that there are platforms today where you can use satellite imagery to actually design systems. Now, this was not accessible outside of a certain, maybe restricted ecosystem in India. So not accessible 10 years ago to anyone, right?
For example, solar lamps.
Yeah, so solar lamps is one example. Even Google has some open source thing. There have been other initiatives. For example, a think tank called C-Step actually released a tool for Bangalore where they have taken LiDAR imagery, which is almost at 5 centimeter resolution, scanned the whole city and actually tried to overlay rooftop solar panels on every roof in Bangalore. So you can actually access it if you enter your DISCOM customer number, right? You can actually get very high resolution imagery of your own roof and the overlay of the solar panels on top. So there are these things which are directly useful for um, getting a rooftop solar proposal very easily. Um, Basically, they have essentially reduced the cost of information access for customers. Right? We're able to get a proposal; it's good enough to make a decision, and then after that, we can do a detailed survey and actually plot things out as they happen on the road. The first cut proposal doesn't need time to create.
I like what you said. Information technology has reduced its cost, and that has enabled this sector to expand
Correct.
substantially. Correct.
Correct. And one important thing is that we are also kind of making all of this available even to small installers in, say, tier 2, tier 3 cities or beyond. It's not just Delhi and Mumbai and Bangalore which has access to this technology. Anybody out there can actually access it and make use of it. Where I think there are issues is something I'll probably discuss later. But I think there has been phenomenal technological growth which has fueled a lot of this thing, right? Now, what it has also given is that the increased reliability has actually given a lot of comfort to people financing these systems. So, they are actually extending loans or EMIs because they know that there is data access, so you know that these systems are whether these systems are working or not. So you can actually tie that to repayments, for example, right? So that has also, it's been an indirect way in which all of this technology has enabled financing to actually be delivered for, even so that you don't even spend on these systems as a capital expenditure. You're just spending like an EMI. It's as easy as buying a TV, right? In fact, I think this is a good place to mention. So I think we also help Atria Power. So this is a company which is being run by our chancellor, and they actually are doing all of these things. They're using satellite imagery, they're using technology, they're using financing options in such a way that they make it super seamless for the customer, right? So I think, like them, I think there are some others who are adopting it, but I think you have to use all of these options to get scale in the future, right?
All right. A lot of information. So we talked majorly about information technology and how its cost reduction is helping in this sector in so many multiple ways. Where do you think even information technology has a slight disadvantage or has a limitation? Because I'm sure, like as you mentioned, that nowadays even a normal person can just access satellite imagery and create this sort of plan or execute this, right? But in terms of when we talk about businesses, as well as when we talk about an individual that is investing in solar energy or rooftop solar spaces, where does that difference comes in plans of execution? And as a person that is, as an individual who is ready to opt for rooftop solar, what do you think he has to learn from these big businesses that can seamlessly do and install other systems on other people's roofs?
So it's a loaded question. So I'm going to kind of take a different approach at it, right? So there are, today in India, you have close to 10,000 companies which do rooftop solar. That is a massive number. Out of the 10,000 companies, maybe 100 of them are operating in your city or your area, right? Now, if you want a proposal on rooftop solar, you get it from 5 different people. The language all seems the same, right? They all say 25 years of generation. They all say this. The devil really lies in the details. But the details can actually make or break how well your experience would be. First is that I think just looking at it step by step, So as I said, the satellite imagery is a very powerful thing, right? Uh, it allows you to visualize it. Not many people actually use it for their own purposes. The second is that upfront, it's important to understand what are the ramifications of which company you are going with. Right? I'll give you one example. Uh, a lot of installers typically we see they resort to welding on site for the support structure for these solar panels. Right? So they resort to welding on site. The structures are not designed to handle storm or cyclonic wind speeds. What we inevitably get after every storm, for example, Chennai was hit with a cyclone, then next day you'll find LinkedIn is full of posts of, oh, my solar panels have flown away. And in few cases it's also been fatal, right? Essentially, you have to design this environment for handling the worst of conditions. And as climate change kind of intensifies these hurricanes and all, you have to also design it to last for the next 25 years, which means you have to be slightly forward thinking in terms of the design and execution aspect. A lot of people do welding on site. Now, welding on site means that you don't really have control over the structural stability of the thing. Welding also means that there will be certain places where you will have rusting issue happening after a certain time. What I do recommend, but it's very difficult to get across to a lay customer who has no technical information, is that use structures which are prefabricated, which are galvanized properly, which basically means there's a rust coating on them to prevent any sort of rusting from happening, which use quality components. So, for example, the bolts which are used are also galvanized. It doesn't matter if the structure is galvanized if the bolt is not, right? How you fix it to the roof itself is a big thing. If it's fixed improperly, it can cause waterlogging or like water seepage into the floor underneath. So these are the details which I would kind of want to focus on, and I think any customer actually has, that is the awareness portion. At this point, I think enough and more customers are aware of the fact that they should go solar. What's stopping the sector from happening is some extent of this decision paralysis. Right?
Decision paralysis.
Yeah. Okay, what is good and what is bad? I don't know, so I'm not going to take a decision. Right. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes people just go for the lowest price. But the lowest price, like any other thing, comes with its own drawbacks. Right. Most of the time, that price is achieved by doing cost cutting somewhere and not telling you about it. Right. And it will manifest itself in some failure, maybe some failure 5 years down the line, by which point the installer has gone somewhere else. You're no longer covered under warranties, and that's it. Your investment has generated far less than it would have. So I think there's a huge issue in conveying what you're doing well technologically to the customer. That I think is a gap which, for example, corporates do that. So there are corporates who have quality standards and safety standards which they adhere to. And that I think is somewhere where even small installers can adopt.
So, in essentially, what you're talking about is that even the smallest of installations should be properly standardized, everything, and it should be done within the proper framework that has been set by various other initiatives and other policies.
Correct. So, I mean, even the smallest installation, be it a 1 kilowatt or a 2 kilowatt system, has to adhere to the quality standards that have been set centrally. There should ideally be some level of traceability in the system in terms of whether you have actually maintained the quality standards or not, as well as all the warranties that are being offered to you and so on. Currently, it's not being enforced very rigorously, and to be honest, the government has decided that it has to spread rooftop solar far and wide. So they have relaxed a lot of the requirements in terms of reporting. It's a perfectly logical move, but then it becomes the responsibility of the customer and the installer to ensure this quality is there. Right? From the government side, they are saying, look, we are giving you a huge subsidy. Now, ideally, don't focus on price, focus on quality. That's the signal they have. And it's a self-enforcement, which means to some extent, you have to ensure that the guidelines are being met as a customer. Right?
I would also like you to discuss the side, like as you mentioned, awareness of the installer, of the client in general. And I would like you to point out the awareness or the points he needs to be, points he considers when he is employing an installer to install a system for his home.
So I think the first thing is that there is a necessity from, and let's talk about residential customers, because I think that's a segment where there's the most information gap today, right? In terms of residential customers, I think the first thing is that if you're availing of the subsidy, the installer actually has to be registered in the PM Surya Ghar portal, which is there. The government has centralized all documentation for the rooftop solar program. So that's where you make an application, you enter your account details as a customer, so that the subsidy directly gets credited to your bank account after the installation proof is given, and so on. But this is the place where the first step should be, are they there in the portal? Because if not, you can't avail of subsidy, right? The second thing is, when you're talking about installations, today because of the subsidy, at least for small systems, the price has been reduced enough that you have to actually focus on quality as opposed to other indices. When I say quality, it doesn't mean only material quality, it also means quality of the process. How well is your comfort level with the sales team there? Right? How quickly are they installing systems? How efficiently are they installing systems? Go if needed, get some visual proof of, like go to a couple of sites where they have installed to see how they are doing it, right? I'll give you an example of why this matters. Let's take an example of cables. Now, cables, if they are not properly run through conduits, have a problem of rats coming and chewing the cables.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, so this is something which you would really not even think about, right? And it doesn't show up in the proposal anywhere, but it will be the point of failure 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, and may impact, again, you'll have downtime, you'll have to replace the cable at your own cost, bunch of things there, right? The second is, use some common sense in terms of designing the system. One place where I regularly see this happening is, once the system is installed, every customer has to actually clean the panels. Right? There will be dust accumulation because of construction work, because of transport, bunch of other things. Right? Whatever particulate matter is there, it can be bird droppings, it can be number of activities actually clouding the panel and causing the efficiency to drop it. Now, where I see a lot of issues is these customers who have designed systems in such a way that you can't actually access the panels safely, right? If you can't access the panels safely, then you have a huge issue of maintenance. Your efficiency is going to drop by, say, 2%, 3% every month. If you're not cleaning it, it never gets restored to its full extent. By the end of the year, you're looking at almost 20 to 25% wasted electricity, wasted energy generation from your system. So it might as well be a dead asset for all intents and purposes after that timeline, right? So this is a huge thing. So you need to be able to design your system with some basic safety principles in mind also, right? You can't jeopardize your life every time to go clean the panel. You can't jeopardize even if you're not cleaning but somebody else is cleaning, say your house help, you can't actively go and tell them to hang from a rooftop just to clean this panel, right? It can't be at their expense, their loss of life or whatever, injury or whatever. So I think there's also some level of common sense which has to be taken into account. So there are quality principles, there are proxies for these quality standards. For example, if my structure is certified by an independent third-party organization who has validated that it's able to last 150 kilometers per hour, then I have enough trust that it's able to actually last that amount. Right? I would always insist on doing prefabricated structures. I'd always insist on having structures which are, essentially come machined to your house, as opposed to a guy doing welding and cutting on site. Right. The third thing is, I think you have to also opt for installers who cause minimal disruption to your life. For example, a 3 kilowatt system which gets installed in 4 hours or 5 hours or maybe even a day will ensure that you have to only give access to your roof for a day. Right? You're not spending all your weekend or basically even longer than that to install the system. Okay. They are delivering within, say, 48 hours or 72 hours of confirming the order. That has a direct impact in the fact that it starts generating electricity much faster than a guy who takes a month to deliver the system. So these are all factors which are there, right? And I think the most important thing is to be able to identify a counterparty, an installer, who delivers on as many of these as possible, right? So I think that's pretty much it.
I would like to make the people watching the podcast, I would like to tell them that before you install a rooftop solar plant or a system, first of all, before finalizing the installer, I think proper research should be done by the client itself. They should be at least basically aware of the policies, what regulations are there, and some aspect of what materials can be used and the right materials to use.
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head. So there is an aspect of policy. Power is a state subject. So both the center has some policies and the state also has its own policies. And sometimes, so the state's policies will always win in a manner of speaking because the state has flexibility on how to make its policies. Right, so they will have, BESCOM will have its own procedure for example, for installing net meters and so on, even if that is guided by the center. Right, so they, because of the way this works, especially in Indian context, power is a state subject. So the state ultimately, and via the state, the DISCOMs have jurisdiction on their particular domains. Right. The second is that I think the quality of the installer we have already spoken about, the quality of the technology also we have spoken about. One thing is in terms of longevity of the system, right? I think doing proper maintenance from time to time, be it preventive maintenance where somebody comes to your house every say 3 months or 6 months, or this is also important, right? They just come, they do a check all the bolts are fine or not, check the consumables like the fuses and such things. What could have happened is that there could have been a lightning strike at some point in the last 3 months, and your lightning protection system, the fuse might have been blown. If there is another lightning strike which happens at that point,
The system is gone.
then you might have issues with the system, right? So you have to keep ensuring that these systems are there. Now this activity is a very low touch activity in the sense that you don't have to do much if you have a good relationship with the installer you are doing and they have this quality of trust and so on in them, that they will come and they'll actively do it. I think this is something you have to enforce as part of the buying process.
So as I said, the client needs to be more aware.
You're absolutely right. So I'm saying that ultimately it is the client's responsibility we see people do a lot of the due diligence before buying a house or before buying a car. But this is just as important to do that due diligence on, right? For a house or a car, because you're spending a lot of money, you are doing that. Even for a bike, say which costs 1 lakh, you're doing a lot of due diligence and you're doing a lot of scheduled maintenance paid, oil changes, and things like that. I mean, this is much lesser effort than that, but that small amount of effort has to be done.